Hello, BookTube. I thought we'd do a little Friday reads today. It's almost exclusively what I actually will be reading on Friday. But a couple of the books are small, and you'll be relieved to know that not all of them are biographies. We'll start with this tiny thing. This is by Martin Rees, the Astronomer Royal. This is On the Future. Just a little book of ruminations of his on all the different existential threats that may or may not face humankind. I read a little bit of this when I got the advance copy a long time ago, and of course I liked what I read, but it got displaced by something much bigger, and now I have a finished copy, so it's time for me to read this. I read enough at the beginning of the book to get to the part where Martin Rees answers the obvious dinner party question that he must get 1,000,000 times a year, which is one of those existential threats a giant killer asteroid? he pretty much dismisses that, but then he goes on to talk about all sorts of other things, climate change and all that. So this will be a wonderful aperitif for my Friday reads. Then the next one, also not going to take long at all, half an hour maybe, is this new thing from, who is this? Reaction Books. This is Dino Mania. Just a heavily illustrated tour through the world of dinosaurs, from the earliest times when they were discovered to the present day. And I've read, there have been 1,000,000 books like this out there, and I read them all. I am a firm and committed sufferer of Dinomania. So I will gladly go through this. I don't imagine that this will be anything new. No offense to the author or to the publisher, but I think I will probably have read this book many times before. In fact, I guess a part of me, a part of my reading mind, is waiting for a meditation on dinosaurs that is not quite so predictable. It's bound to happen, or maybe it has happened and I've missed it, although I like to think I gobble up every dinosaur book that comes out. But one way or another, I'm not faulting the lack of originality here. This is meant to be a celebration of and a sort of trot on Dinomania, the history of it and all the various people in it and all the various reconstructions of dinosaurs, for people who have not read dozens of others. so I'm not faulting the book at all. This next one is very much along the Mary Roach line of books. I got an advance copy a long time ago. I just ignored it. And now is the time for me to read it, because it comes out now. This is by Rose George, and it is 9 pints. Look at that cover. Those of you who spend any time in hospitals or blood donation banks will know what those things are. This is all about blood. It's all about human blood. It's a whole book about human blood. Let me read you just a bit here. Blood carries life, yet the sight of it makes people faint. It is ubiquitous yet taboo, a waste product and a commodity costlier than oil. It can save lives and transmit deadly infections. Each one of us has roughly 9 pints of it, yet many don't even know their own blood type. And, for all the universality of blood, the few tablespoons of it discharged by some 300 million women every day are still regarded as unmentionable. Across millennia, across continents and cultures, menstruation is perhaps the single most demonized biological fact. And this book just goes on, from what I've been able to determine from that summary in the pub sheet. This is just a tour of what blood is and how it's been seen in human society, what it can and cannot do, what misconceptions about it, all that sort of stuff. The kind of popular science tour, only this time not by Mary Roach. It has a blurb by Mary Roach, but it's by someone else. And I'm fascinated. It won't take long at all to read, but I'm fascinated. And then we'll do some biographies, because this is my channel. The first one is, who is this from? Thames and Hudson. And I had not even known that it was coming. So I'm going to gobble it up. In fact, it's probably the most serious thing that I will read of this batch. It's a big, ornate biography of Joseph Albers. Wouldn't be a Steve video without screaming sirens. It wouldn't happen. It does not ever happen without screaming sirens in every video, because I live in a war zone, and I live one town over from a town that has a mortality rate up in the 90s. 90% of the town dies on a daily basis, and they have just a massive influx of new people who don't burn themselves to death on a daily basis, who don't eat poison, clearly marked poison on a daily basis, who don't require 50 screaming ambulance trips from the center of Boston every single day. Anyway, what were we saying? Oh yes, he's a Bauhaus painter. He was a contemporary of Kandinsky and whatnot, and a total fraud, like everyone in that art exhibit, and everyone in that art movement, just a total fraud. Someone who sold canvases painted in one color. Just, I'm going to stretch a 6-foot by 10-foot canvas on a rack. I'm going to paint it blue, and I'm going to sell it for $85,000, and it's going to resell for $85 million, and just a total fraud. You look at the later artwork of this guy, if you want to call it artwork, and it definitely falls in the category, far too full a category in any art museum, modern art museum in the world, of stuff that's hanging up on the wall where if you're a normal person and not a pretentosaurus, your very first reaction will be, I could do that. And the reason you have that reaction is because you could. You will never have that reaction to a legitimate artist, but you will look at something like that, or a fire hydrant just sitting there with a plaque. Yeah, here's a fire hydrant. Anyway, as with most of these people, these frauds who manage to just buy into an artistic movement that does not require artistic ability, if you look at his early paintings, the structured ones, the ones that actually are supposed to be paintings of something, or his sketches, his pencil sketches, his charcoal sketches, they show that he was actually a talented artist. It's just that I would imagine that the bulk of the stuff that this book is going to talk about does not show artistic talent at all. It shows a very different kind of talent, a consumer's talent, an opportunistic talent. But stretching a canvas, painting it pink, applying liberal amounts of varnish, and then saying it's done. Anyway, I know nothing at all about this man's life. And I know I've seen his artwork. People have dragged me to the Tate and to MoMA and to the modern art museums elsewhere. I always make sure to carry a book because whenever I get a chance while they're faking rhapsodies, I can do some reading. It's nothing like the experience of going to an actual art museum and seeing actual art, where you look up on the walls and you see a still life or a landscape or a portrait, and not only are you never tempted to look at it and say, well, I could do that, but you're also transported out of yourself by the sheer genius of what you're looking at, until you get to the inevitable wing of those museums where you've got fire hydrants, and here's a couch cushion. We don't touch it, please. That's why it's behind plate glass, because it's a couch cushion. Or whatnot. but regardless of the art, I don't know anything about this man. And so that makes it absolutely fascinating for me. The next biography is very limited in scope. It's about someone I know a lot about, but I have not read the book. I don't think I ever even got an advance copy. This is by David Allen Johnson, who's a very good historian. He's a very agreeable historian on the page. And this is the last weeks of Abraham Lincoln. It just takes you day by day, hour by hour, through everything that we know about the last few weeks of Abraham Lincoln's life. And I find that fascinating, though that, of course, is because of the way the life ends. Every minute of those weeks takes on an extra resonance. And the thing to remember about books like this, again, like with the Dino Mania book, this is not the first book of this type that I have read. And the thing to remember about books like this, especially in light of that resonance, is that, of course, Lincoln didn't know how his life was going to end, and neither did anybody else, not even John Wilkes Booth. So it's a fascinating thing to look at the last few weeks of a life that we know is going to be abbreviated. The times that I read books like this, not just on Lincoln, but on anybody, especially anybody who's been assassinated, it always makes me think about just life in general. Are you living your life in a way that would please you if you knew that John Wilkes Booth was waiting for you two weeks from now? Are you living your day-to-day life that way? Or are you just muddling through? And it's amazing to me in reading biographies of Lincoln that he seemed to do very little muddling through. He seemed always to be sort of one step removed from his own life and able to look at it. I always find that fascinating. We'll see if that comes out in this book or if it's maybe more enhanced. I can't wait. So I'll be doing all of these things in rapid order, and I'll be doing them today and tonight. The last one's also a biography. It's something I think we've seen on this channel before. This is by Sue Perdue, and it is I Am Dynamite. This is the her big biography of Friedrich Nietzsche. And like Albers, I'm faced with the same dilemma when it comes to Nietzsche because he was a total fraud. As most philosophers are. I mean, philosophy just as an intellectual exercise is a waste of time. It's a bunch of people who discovered early on that if they put enough frappuccino squirts of obscurantism into their word games, they can construct what they like to call a system. And they can attract people who are invariably every bit as interested in word games. If you take the philosophical system of any major philosopher, especially modern philosophers like Nietzsche or his ilk, and you put it over a high boil, it falls apart completely. It's not like you boil off the fat and you get to the hard kernel of interesting, innovative, or original thinking. It all boils away. It's like that little video that you sometimes see going around online of somebody who hands a raccoon a ball of sugar, and of course raccoons, they just compulsively wash their food. The raccoon grabs the hump of sugar and is very grateful, moves it immediately to the water, starts washing it, and it vanishes. And the raccoon is visibly upset. That's what happens to philosophy when you put it under a high boil. It's a total waste of time to do. I have nevertheless, because you have to, I have nevertheless waded my way through the gigantic Swiss cheese chunks of this guy's fly-blown books. They're absolute garbage in both languages, both in the original and in translation. They go nowhere, they say nothing, they are infinitely self-impressed, as all philosophy books are. And I get the impression, I get the impression that I'm going to read, I've read a chunk of this already. I sat and read a chunk of it, but I haven't read the whole thing. I get the impression from the chunk that I read that Sue Perdue is considerably more playful with her subject than any other Nietzsche biography that I've ever read. I haven't read that many. It's like Albers. This is largely virginal territory for me. And for the same reason, because the man was an objectionable fraud. Which always makes reading an extensive and extensively researched biography feel like something I'll get around to tomorrow. But nope. Nope, I'm doing 3 biographies today. Well, and by today I mean all this afternoon, all this evening, tonight, and into tomorrow. Whatever I don't finish, this is my Friday reads for the weekend. It's just, as usual on this channel, this will not be the sum total of the books that I read this weekend. So that's my Friday reads for now, is I Am Dynamite, then The Last Weeks of Abraham Lincoln, and then Joseph Albers. So it's 3 biographies, and 2 of them will probably be a little bit slow going for me because I can't fly through them. I don't know what's coming next. Then 9 Pints, which is about human blood, all that you wanted to know about human blood and were afraid to ask. Then Dino Mania, the latest tour of the discovery of dinosaurs, the craze about dinosaurs, the steadily increasing knowledge of dinosaurs, and On the Future by Martin Rees. Just a quick little volume on his thoughts about various threats to humanity, existential and otherwise. So I will just launch onto these. I've got a little work to do, a little writing to do, but it's under control. So I will be mostly reading, which is a delightful feeling. And as usual on Friday Reads, I want to hear from you. What are you working on this weekend? What are you reading? So I'm gonna wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.